Welcome to the Hud Grad Club. I'm Chris Webb, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Career Consultant with the University of Huddersfield's Careers Employability Service. And, full disclosure, I'm also a University of Huddersfield graduate. So I've generally got pretty positive things to say about both the institution and any of our graduates. But don't take my word for it. In this podcast, we'll be meeting different members of the University of Huddersfield's global alumni community, finding out what makes them tick, about their experiences during their time at the university and their career journeys since completing their studies. Join us as we explore the inspiring, innovative and diverse range of individuals that make up the Hud Grad Club. Hello and a very warm welcome to the Hud Grad Club podcast. And Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Now, for any of our viewers maybe who haven't met you before or come across you before, can you tell us a little bit more about your background, so what you studied at the university and what you're currently doing at the moment?
Okay, so I started at Huddersfield University back in 2006, which does seem very much like half a lifetime ago. And I did a BA Honours with Creative English Studies with Creative Writing. So it had both literature and language, but with creative writing. So it's like a degree with 3 parts. And I graduated in 2009, and I'm now currently working as a senior library assistant with the Information Resources team at the University of Huddersfield Library.
Fantastic. So keeping it close to kind of where it all began. And I know we'll kind of be digging into that in a little bit more detail a bit later in the podcast. But as always, we start every episode with our greatest Hud story ever told. So this is an opportunity to reflect on your time at the university and any sort of key memories or special memories that you have from your time there. So what would you like to share with us? What is your kind of greatest Hud story you'd like to share on the podcast?
Greatest Hud story, the memory that always comes up when I have to think of something really memorable about university. As much as I enjoyed the lectures and the lecturers, they were all lovely in my student flats, it was one experience. It must have been during 2007, 2008. I was in my second year at Stores Hall apartment flats out in Kirkburton Waits, where I spent my first 2 years. And we had a little earthquake. Oh, well, we had the experience of an earthquake because the epicenter was actually down in South Yorkshire somewhere. But I remember it was at night, we were all in bed, the flat's upstairs because I was on the ground floor, actually being quiet. And I just remember hearing this really loud noise. It sounded like a train coming past, which was impossible because we're on the top of a hill and there's no train. And then the birds went quiet. And then everything just started shaking for about 10, 15 seconds. And then it kind of like faded away off into the distance, just like a train would. And then I remember hearing thuds from the flat upstairs and this high-pitched voice going, "That's an earthquake, it's an earthquake, everyone, it's an earthquake." And then everyone was awake and sharing the whole experience of surviving an earthquake.
I think I actually remember this situation. I was living in Lincoln at the time, and I think the epicenter was actually Market Raisin in Lincolnshire. So it was. I seem to remember that happening, and it was about.
I did try googling because I was aware of this question coming up, and I did try googling, and I couldn't really find much, especially in terms of a BBC article picking up on where this epicenter was. But I know it wasn't in West Yorkshire. I know it was somewhere south of us, so that's why I just assumed South Yorkshire.
I hopefully solved the mystery for you. I'm fairly sure it was Market Raisin because it was definitely that year. So, well, there we go. A very, as you say, kind of not something that you can always kind of point to in the UK, certainly as having experience.
No, it just always stuck in my mind. I can still remember the sound and the birds' morning song just going quiet. So it's like the animals knew that something was coming.
And it goes to show it's pretty significant because I remember it as well from a completely different context. So I mean, as you said, there's some memories that always kind of stick in the mind. And obviously you'll have quite a lot of memories of the university, having not only kind of studied there, but of course, now working there as well. So it's quite a good time, I guess, to sort of peel that back a bit and find out, what kind of led from the degree you studied to the job that you're doing now. And I suppose a good point to start is maybe even a little bit earlier than that, is sort of what brought you to the university. So what made you kind of decide to study the degree you studied, and particularly at home?
Well, back when I was progressing from college onto university, I had a dream of becoming the next J.K. Rowling. So I knew that creative writing had to be in there somewhere. And I really only ever looked at 2 universities. One, of course, was Huddersfield. The other one was Bolton. And Huddersfield just felt geographically nearer to my home because I come from North Yorkshire, so one of the other Yorkshires. Some say the first and true one, but that's their opinion. And it also had Stilts Hall, and I think that's what really won it for me, because I come from the countryside of North Yorkshire. I wasn't really keen on the idea of living in a really noisy, busy town centre, as many students do. They love it. They like tons of flats all around the university do that kind of thing. I wasn't looking forward to traffic noise, and Stilts Hall is nice and quiet out in the countryside. And yeah, that's part of the reason that won it for me. But also, it just felt nicer than Bolton did. I can't really say why, it just did, just connected with me.
It's amazing how many people do bring up Stilts Hall on the podcast, actually. It's a really common kind of happy memory I think people have, which is great. And you mentioned kind of earlier that your degree was quite broad, encompassing those different sort of aspects of English. What kind of made you, I guess, pick that particular degree, and where did that sort of lead to you kind of initially, I guess, after graduating?
Oh, well, I was one of those students that kind of did the degree because it was a subject I enjoyed. I always felt more confident in English. I couldn't really ever say I was really good at language or really good at literature. I was kind of like middling ground on both, but creative writing I really enjoyed. I've always been a big reader, hence the bookshelves. I'd always had a good imagination for it, and I was writing since the age of 16, trying to do the Harry Potter thing. Obviously not with Harry Potter for licensing issues and copyright, etc. And so it got to my third year, and I was thinking, gosh, I'm going to finish uni soon. What do I do? What do I have as a job options? I mean, I knew I could work in a bookshop quite happily. I had previous jobs in retail working for Safeways before it became Morrison's, and during my second and third year, I had a part-time job at a little newsagent's opposite where the old library used to be now, because it's now moved currently. So a lot of changes has happened since I've been here. And so I actually thought, well, I could become an English teacher, but I thought I can't control my own teenage brother or sister without yelling them, telling them off, and just losing my patience. And no, I can't. No matter what age you gave me, I would struggle with it. My mum was a childminder, and I can never make any of the babies happy. So that was a good indicator. So I actually went to see what I remember as being kind of like the job shop team, what was the careers service back then. And I was like, what can I do? Would you have any advice for me? Kind of like, I don't really know what to do. And one of them suggested maybe to explore teaching a bit more. So they signed me up to a shadow placement kind of work experience type thing with Kirklees College when it was at its old, now derelict site. There's going to be so many olds in this conversation because so much has changed and moved around. So I spent some time working with some students that were doing kind of like entry-level courses into public services whose English levels were quite poor. I remember helping one student try to understand the point of a full stop because he just couldn't get it. When he would write, it was like one seamless long paragraph. He just didn't get the point of a full stop. And that itself was kind of a chance, like, yeah, how do I explain a full stop? No one's ever, you kind of learn things, but then don't remember how you learn them. So I did that for a little bit, but it was whilst I was doing that I also did a afternoon shadow placement at the university library, because my career advisor at the time said, well, have you considered libraries? They've got books, they've got a bit of teaching involved. Why not speak to the teams here and see what they get up to? So one afternoon a week for 10 weeks, I think it was 10 or 6 weeks, I had an afternoon with a different team. I remember working with the law librarian team when they had their own little law library office. This was all before the library had its big refurb and change and renovation. So it's changed a lot since I left in 2009. And seeing how they work, keeping all the law journals up to date, taking out old bits of legislation, putting in new ones, and helping with the interlibrary loans team. So learning about how actually we share knowledge and contents and resources with other libraries, and therefore the students and academics and vice versa. Meeting some of the library systems team, looking at the book acquisitions team, and that really broadened my mind. Like, libraries are so much more than just someone at a desk reading books or stamping books out all day, because they didn't quite have self-service machines, if I remember, when at the time when the library had like a big desk when I was a student there. And then my careers advisor managed to suggest that I'd start volunteering with Kirklees public libraries, so I started doing that one afternoon a week. It was not just at the central library where I got to see how that works and what kind of software they use to order books and label them and tag them and put them on the shelves, and but also seeing them prepare for events like doing healthy eating events in some of their suburb libraries. So we actually got to work with children and parents and give them a fun story about a monkey eating fruit and then help them all make fruit smoothies, which was lots of fun and very messy, and everyone had it just showed how much there is to do with libraries, like how varied the role is. And so whilst I was doing my student support work at Kirklees College, I managed to get an interview through my contact there. Well, not an interview, kind of like an informal discussion, really, with their sixth form college librarian, saying, okay, how what's your work involved? How did you get into it? How does anyone get into your type of position? And she made me understand that in terms of academic librarian roles, in terms of sixth forms and higher education and secondary schools, it often involves requiring a library degree, which some universities still do teach. It's like a lucky few around the country that do them, either part-time or long distance. But the trick is with doing the degree, you've also got to have experience to go with it in order to understand the degree. So it's like a chicken and the egg situation. You can't do the degree without experience, but you can't often get jobs, at least paid jobs, without having the degree. And so, okay, well, at least I'm getting something, because I've spoken to you. That's something I can remember and record down, and I'm doing my Kirklees library experience. And it was about springtime in my final year. And I remember an assistant librarian job came up at Huddersfield New College up near Sallandine Nook. And I applied for it thinking, well, I can give it a go, see if I get any feedback. And at least I've got some volunteering experience to put in to show that I'm keen, that I'm eager, that I'm showing initiative, that kind of thing. A month went by, I didn't hear, so I just crossed off like, yeah, that's fine. I knew my chances were relatively low because I didn't have the degree that everyone seems to suggest that was necessary. And then it came through to early summer, so May and June time, and I got a call from them. And they said, hi, would you still be interested in this role? I said, yes, very much so, because I was finishing my degree with nothing else to do but working in an estate agent. Went for the interview, somehow did relatively okay, I like to think, with the questions, and was offered the job later that afternoon. And then I was there as an assistant librarian without a degree, with a little bit of volunteer experience in, but the team was small but very welcoming. The college community was also very warm, welcoming, and it actually felt a bit strange to work with all these teenagers, because I remember one of them saying kind of like, how old are you, miss? I'm like, well, I'm old enough to have done my A-levels, done my degree, and come back and got a job. So they all kind of like thought I was probably more their age when I really wasn't. I was I'm just very petite, which is why I often look a bit younger than I actually am. My sister is always the one that gets to be looked older than me because she's taller.
I mean, that's really interesting about, you know, sort of your entry point into the industry. Because I think, as you say, it is, you know, librarian work is, you know, an area that perhaps I think a lot of people might have a stereotype of what they think it is, but perhaps haven't really worked within it and understand the, you know, the complexities of it, or the different areas within that field. So what sort of, following kind of the graduation, you know, you're into this sort of assistant librarian job, and now, as you mentioned, you know, you're kind of back in a role with the university library. What was the kind of journey like then, from sort of that initial graduate role to kind of where you've ended up now?
It's been a very slow but progressively exciting and kind of like gaining confidence, independence, full circle in a way, because when I did get that role at New College, as I said, there was a small team. There was myself, my manager, who's the full college librarian, who were full-time, and then we had 2 part-time assistants. And she was very supportive. She encouraged me to sign up and get my degree started. It was part-time distance at Glyndwr University in Wrexham in Wales. And then halfway through my degree, unfortunately, our team was reduced to just me. So I became solo while still doing my degree, and managed to help with the library transition from a large space into a smaller space. But that in itself, some people, it may seem like being thrown into the deep end without paddle or a float or anything. But I actually was partly looking forward to because of course I could pick all the books that I liked. Because my Moss did always take the lead in picking the fiction, but because I was an avid fiction reader, I was always eager to add books on, or see books in the supermarket. I think, I'll need to add that onto her list and that kind of thing. But then I took control of that. But then it also gave me entire responsibility. So not only to have to manage like the general data provision of serving students and staff needed teaching resources or research resources, computer issues, borrowing books, that kind of thing, but also managing the budget, so make sure that was all covered, managing e-resources and technical skills, but also kind of trying to make changes and improvements. And it took me a while, but once I found my feet, and making a change and feel like, yeah, I can do this. No one's going to tell me. I mean, I did have a supportive line manager. From my line manager just changed throughout my 9 years there, often starting with English teachers, and then they migrated to someone in SLT eventually in my final year there. But they're all really supportive. I mean, I taught them first, and they're like, yeah, just try it, see how it works. And a lot of the time we did, because it was a very small space, albeit for a very large college, we probably served about less than 5% of the student cohort on any given year. But the student users that did use us, they really benefited and they really appreciated that space. They were regulars, they would come back. So I knew I wasn't making headways with the thousands of them, but I'd like to work well with those that I did, those show appreciation for those customers, give them value and benefits kind of thing. And so I'd put on fundraising events. So I remember we did what was it? It was a Literacy Trust Christmas hot chocolate event where students can pay 50p for a hot chocolate, but also pick up a book or return a book. We did blind dates with books, so we'd wrap them up in paper and put just a blurb on them and see who would want to borrow them, that kind of thing. Got involved in lots of literacy events, so we did like the 6-book challenge with Reading Ahead, like 6-book challenge, and then it became Reading Ahead under the Reading Agency. But then we also did we did Poetry by Heart, which was a national poetry recitation competition, which I managed to organise an in-house competition for to find our college champion. And then that year she went on to compete in the county championships in West Yorkshire, won that, and then I got to accompany her on a big trip to London for the national finals. And we did it all again the second year as well with the same students. So it was, if I hadn't done that, that wouldn't have happened. That student wouldn't have had that experience. And it was seeing that little impact just on the few, if not the many, that really made me kind of like run with my job and make as many changes and improvements and just do lots of fun things to engage. And I also started working a lot more with academic staff, because I know my boss did lots of library inductions, but that was generally about it. Occasionally she'd get involved with EPQ students, but not often. So I kept trying to really engage as much as I could with the staff, sent them lots of emails. Popped up a lot in staff briefings saying, oh, the library's doing this, or I'm doing this, or if you want to come learn more about this, come speak to me. And by the end of my time there, I spent about 9 years, 6 of them solo. I had built up a really good core group of subjects and subject teams that would often have me come in to do online resource inductions or working with the EPQ students. Or I'd hold teacher training sessions every summer when we have inset days on particular resources, and really open up the eyes of the teachers and how they can use us as well as we can support them, kind of things. Because of course so many students just walk past the door and think, yep, it's a library, it's full of books. That's true, but we also have ebooks, we had online journals, kind of like, and I kept often trying to market it to help the students when they get to university. And I remember doing, it was an information skills lesson involving Spider-Man and Thor. And Thor was the silly one because he thought he knew everything because he was a god, but Spider-Man, being Peter Parker, was clever and he went to the library and he found all these things. And it was just a bit of fun. It was just a bit of fun. I like to think the students kind of got it. If not, it made it probably memorable because it stuck in their mind and how juvenile it was. Because I'll always remember trying to explain to students the point of referencing and good references. And I would actually relate it back to CVs. Like if you're interviewing someone for a job and you see 5 applicants and they've all got the same references, what's the difference? What one stands out? Whereas you see one that's got 3 different references from 3 good employers, it's the same with academic references, really. If you're referencing more varied sources, you're showing research, better understanding, good information skills. Whereas if your student friends are all doing the same core textbook, then you're all going to get the same mark. I like to think that's correct. That's what I was teaching for a number of years anyway. But yes, 6 years went by in a blur. We were constantly doing new things. And then in 2018, the library was moved again, strangely enough, back to its old space, but sharing it with a service. And it just made me realise that, gosh, it was nearly coming up to a decade that I'd been there in this one role. I thought, surely I can do something else, because it's just me. I can't really progress myself. I'd upskilled myself as much as I could. I'd done my degree. I did adult learning and teaching course to try and boost my teaching skills. They'd put me on a middle management course to give me middle management skills, even though I didn't really have a team. I had a team of student volunteers that were all really good. They did their hours with me and they earned a Be Inspired Award certificate, which again was really good for CVs and Duke of Edinburgh students as well. And some of those students were phenomenal. They were really good, the ones that we did have come through. But I thought, I've hit my own glass ceiling. What can I do? So I started looking for other jobs, and I had my eye on the university because I knew several colleagues from within our college had migrated there and that kind of thing. So I thought, well, what else can I do? So I kept looking. There was one job that came up as acquisitions team leader in information resources. I applied for it, stunned myself by getting an interview, and then shot myself in the foot by showing how I had zero team management skills at all in this one interview. But I was just generally being honest. And there were some questions that I generally couldn't answer because I didn't have experience in that context or scenario. So I was fumbling my way through. So it's basically, I'm sorry, sir, I don't know the answer to that one. Another post came up within information resources for being part of the subscriptions team. Applied for that, managed to get through all like 50 plus applicants to an interview. Sadly didn't get it, but I got some really good feedback from one of the interview ladies, who was Katie. Another post came up for the same team several months later, now into autumn, and third time lucky, I was in. And she hired me, and I became her employee, she my line manager. And so I'm here. Here I am.
And it's come full circle.
Yes, it's a very long circle.
Well, I mean, great. I mean, thanks for making brilliant reflections there. And as you say, quite as many people have, quite a squiggly kind of career journey, even within that sort of one field. And so much, as you said, that actually, was kind of built on decisions you took or chances that you took to kind of develop your career or try new things, which is really, really interesting. And it's a really nice spot, I guess, to kind of come to the final part of the podcast, which is our underrated careers advice section. So you've kind of reflected a little bit on some of these things already around, kind of interviews, for example, or training and development benefits of kind of volunteering and work experience. But are there any particular kind of nuggets of wisdom you think you'd like to share, I guess, from your experience so far within your career that you think could be useful for any current students or graduates who might be watching?
From my humble career and journey path, I would have to say, speak to people, and even if you get experience that requires volunteering, don't turn it down, because I do think I wouldn't have got my job at Huddersfield New College if I hadn't had the volunteering experience at Kirklees Libraries, because I don't think that would have given me any kind of possibility of being any kind of suitable candidate. And speak to people, it's how I learnt about the breadth of variety and the role at the university, as well as speaking to the librarian at Kirklees College when I volunteered there, and how FE libraries work. And try to ditch any stereotypes of any job that you might have. As you say, as much as I'd love to be paid just to read books and stamp books all day, library work isn't like that. It's much more varied, much more fun, much more challenging. You can get up and down in various teams and roles and positions, and that's what I'm looking forward to now that I'm working back at my old university, which is lovely. Oh, that's a fantastic note to end on. And I think, excellent advice there, particularly about sort of challenging stereotypes around jobs, and particularly the realities, I guess, as you say, even all jobs will have potentially fun components to them, but they'll also have lots of other varied things that maybe you didn't realize you might enjoy, and you kind of learn to enjoy as you move along. So great reflections there. If we've got any kind of students or graduates watching or listening to the podcast who might be interested in getting in touch with you moving forward, where's the best place to find you? Social media, Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Soul Chaser Becky, which was actually the title of the first novel I tried to write during my degree. But it's Soul as in SOUL, then Chaser, CHASER, and then just Becky. But I'm there. So I'm happy to talk libraries and career paths if anyone thinks they would like to follow in my footsteps. Great. Well, what we'll do is we will flash those up on the screen when we kind of release the podcast, or kind of put them in the description if people want to reach out. So excellent, very, very kind offer there. But that takes us really nicely to the end of the podcast. So all that remains to be said is, Rebecca, thanks so much for taking your time to join us and reflect on your kind of career journey. Thanks for becoming another member of the Hud Grad Club, and we wish you well with all of the future kind of career developments moving forward. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for listening. Take care. All the best. Enjoyed the podcast? Then go to the University of Huddersfield YouTube channel for all of our future episodes. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to hit the bell button for notifications. If you'd like to be involved in the Hud Grad Club podcast moving forward, please get in touch with us on alumni@hud.ac.uk.